Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club. We are in week 2 of our February selection, which is this biography of Marie Antoinette by the great biographer Antonia Fraser, who a lot of you might know from Mary, Queen of Scots, my favorite book of hers. This is a big biography of the French queen, who is largely known, if she's known at all to most people, for a quip and also the way she died. She's known for the quip of "let them eat cake," and it's known, of course, that she was executed, that she was beheaded. Um, this book, of course, wants you to learn a lot more than that, and we are up to the second installment here. It's basically a 400-page book, so we're reading basically 100 pages a week. And in this second installment, we see the flowering of the fruits that were planted in the first installment. The first installment belonged almost entirely to Marie's extremely formidable mother, the Empress Maria Theresa, who sends her off to France, definitely cries. She doesn't act like a normal mother. She acts like a commander-in-chief until the carriage is pulling away. And then Antonia Fraser pulls back the curtain on her humanity, and we see that it is bothering her. Send her apparently very bright and vivacious daughter away. But that's how statecraft is done. So Marie goes into France. She marries the heir to the throne of France and insists, in the chapters that we're seeing today and a little bit in the end of the last week's chapters, she insists that she wants to be good, that she wants to be a beloved figure, that she wants to do credit to her new country. She insists that people talk to her only in French, not in German, that people help her to learn how to become a French queen, which is her destiny. That's an odd thing. I don't know if you're reading this biography and you're not familiar with biographies, and especially not familiar with royal biographies, you might not realize how odd that is. That level of conscientiousness, it's easy to dismiss it now as hoity-toity dilettantism of the 1% of the 1%, but that kind of conscientiousness was rare. Has always been rare in terms of royalty, and she also makes a point of trying to get to know everybody and trying to like everybody in the society at Versailles, which certainly clashes with the stereotypical view of her as a blithe moron. It certainly clashes with that. The point that I want to make now, and we'll wrap up with this point when we're done, is that is intentional on the biographer's part. Too often, people who don't read biography for pleasure, of course, it's my favorite genre. It's a pleasure that I absolutely love. I absolutely swear by it. I've read more biographies than I've read anything else in my life, even novels. And people who don't read a lot of biographies, or any, sometimes they are under the same misapprehension that afflicts people who don't read any nonfiction of any kind, which is that it's all book reports, that it's all technical manuals, that there's no artistry involved. That attitude is widespread. Consider, for instance, how routinely we dismiss older works of history or older works of biography. Even if you like such things. I've known fans of history and biography who still dismiss an older work on subject A, Y, or B simply because it's older, which it plays into the idea that these are just auto manuals and that the most recent one will therefore automatically be the best one. That idea plays into the idea that there's no artistry involved here. And of course there is. There's a lot of artistry involved here. We'll be getting to that. We'll be getting to the fact that one of the things that you should be paying attention to, I would hope, when you're reading this book, aside from an utterly fascinating story, is the presence of an artist, the presence of the writer. Antonia Fraser is not simply hitting play on a tape recorder. She is, actually, those of you who were born in the 21st century, you'll have to Google tape recorder. But she's not hitting play. She's using her sources. She is building a portrait. And a lot of things happen. In the section of pages that we're reading for today, a lot of major things happen. Some didn't seem very likely for a large part of the first 100 pages that we read, namely the reason that Marie Antoinette is in France at all. She gets there and likes the heir to the throne is her husband. She likes him well enough. He's intelligent. He's well-mannered. He's not brutal. He's not stupid. But he's also not interested in her at all. He seems very diffidently courteous, but that's all. He's certainly not romantically aroused. And that presents a problem when you are involved, as Maria Theresa is, in dynastic alliance building. You can't have dynastic alliance buildings if you don't have a dynasty. You can't have a dynasty without children. And Marie's husband shows absolutely no interest in that side of the arrangement. For a long time, he shows no interest whatsoever. I think Antonia Fraser, in the last 100 pages that we read, is a little bit cagey, maybe because the sources are, on what changed that. Something obviously changed that. I doubt that the most human explanation would be that the Dauphin just needed that much time to get accustomed to her or whatnot. That seems to me to be unlikely. A medical explanation is floated in the last chapter, the last chunk of chapters that we read. This time around, that problem is in the rearview mirror, because one of the major events that happens in the chapters that we're reading today is that Marie becomes pregnant and delivers a healthy, happy baby girl. And it is a wonderful scene. One of the things that I love Antonia Fraser for, one of the things that I love all great biographers for, is that in the midst of their mountain of research, they don't lose their ability to spot a good moment, a good human moment. It's entirely possible that Antonia Fraser's marriage might have helped with her ability to spot a good scene, to craft a good bit of dialogue. Whatever the reason, though, she's infallible in finding those moments. It's what makes her book so wonderful to read. She's better at it than her mother was, and her mother was not bad at that very thing. The scene that she gives us when that baby girl is born is incredibly touching. Where young Marie, a lively, vivacious young woman who could easily have died in childbirth, she knew that as well as anybody. Women went into the childbirthing chamber not expecting to come out alive. You can see how callous and otherworldly a procedure that it was in these chapters. At one point, in the immediate aftermath of a birth, the room is entirely crowded with people. They're laughing and joking and talking, and the windows have been sealed shut. No fresh air at all, and Marie faints. And it takes a while for people to notice. They don't even notice that she's passed out. But in the scene that Antonia Fraser gives us here, with the birth of that little baby girl, Marie says to her, "Well, you weren't what we wanted. You weren't what people wanted. Of course, they wanted a male. They wanted a boy to be an heir to the heir." She tells that tiny, bawling little baby, "You weren't what people wanted. But I actually prefer it this way, because instead of belonging to the state, you'll belong to me. You'll be the joy of my life rather than the joy of the state." That is wonderful, absolutely wonderful as a moment. You have to wonder how personally involved and how personally motivated it was. Was Marie old enough at this point to know that one of her own sisters was performing that role for her mother? Of always being there in good times and bad. I'm not leaving. I'm not going to leave your side. I am a staff of support for you. Whatever the reason, that scene is wonderful, and a biographer need not include it. I have read 2 Marie Antoinette biographies that did not include that moment, even though the records that document that moment are 200 years old. So it's a biographer's choice to do that. Of course, another major event that happens in these pages is the death of the king. Which, if you are married to the heir, that is a major event. King Louis XV, is feeling really sick, feeling really, really bad, worse and worse. And his doctors are tiptoeing around, his courtiers are tiptoeing around. They don't want to comment on the fact that his face is as black as coal. They don't want to comment on the smell or the look of his bowel movements, all of which were examined from the day that he was born. Finally, it's the old king himself, who, I say old, he was younger than I am. The king himself looks at his body when his clothes are off. He looks at his body and says, "It's smallpox." he looks at all the bumps and pustules, all the discoloration, and realizes that he is going to die, that he is certainly going to die. That's an amazing moment. It shows you a lot about what monarchy was like at the time, that where maybe not in King Louis XV's case, but certainly in Louis before him and in many other kings, including across the Channel in England, you could suffer real material harm if you were the one who said to the king, "It's smallpox." But it is, and he doesn't live long after he notices that, and the whole court is in uproar because it's extremely contagious, and there are no preventative measures, no pandemic measures, no health measures of any kind. There was an inoculation. There was a primitive kind of inoculation, but the Dauphin did not have it. The Dauphin did not have it. The prince, Marie's husband, did not have that inoculation. If he'd caught smallpox, he'd have died as well, throwing the whole world, especially Marie's whole world, into chaos. They don't get sick. Of course, they don't die. They are young and healthy. They see the countryside. Marie's first official visit to Paris is a raving success, an enormous success. Huge crowds of people jostling each other in the mirror to get a look at her, prompting contemporary witnesses, as Antonia Fraser tells us in these chapters, to look on her husband as an accessory, just a mere accessory, that she was the star of the show. And these chapters also show us another major event, which is the birth of another child, a son, an heir. But I don't know. When I read biographies, unless they're very dry, I'm looking for the human element in all of them. There are human elements all throughout the pages that we're reading today. Human elements and also recognizable faces. The Mozarts are pretty recognizable. And so are a lot of the composers, some of the scientific figures. Marie's brother, Joseph II, is also familiar. But for me, these chapters, rereading these chapters, I was still in the shadow of the first segment of this book that we read. So for me, the most amazing moment in these chapters was the death of the Empress, the death of Maria Theresa. I thought it's really, really touching that Antonia Fraser includes notes that from the Empress in her copious correspondence with her daughter. You see the very human side of just an ordinary mother, where Maria Theresa, who lectured Marie a lot on fitting in France, adapt, make them proud of you, make them proud of this marriage arrangement. That same mother, years later, is sprinkling her letters to her daughter with phrases and sentences in German and half gently chiding her that I'm doing this so you don't forget your own language. That was a very, very human moment. And those moments are all throughout. These chapters are governed by Maria Theresa, as they could scarcely help but be. But death comes for everybody, and Maria Theresa had been an unwell woman for years, and had just gritted her way past it. Finally, she realizes, no, this moment comes for us all, and I can't avoid it anymore. She insists on, she makes actually a very weirdly congruent decision that was made by England's Queen Elizabeth I, of wanting to meet death on her feet. I don't want to curl up and get lost in a deathbed. I don't want to be rolled around. I don't want to be sedated. Maria Theresa, in Antonia Fraser's account here, Maria Theresa has the classic sentiment of, I want to see death coming. And it comes. And there's a lot of genuine grief on Marie's part. It's not feigned at all. I get the impression in these chapters, I wonder if you do, those of you who are reading this book for your monthly STD infection, I wonder if you get the impression that Marie's effusions of affection to her brother, Joseph, don't seem completely sincere. They seem more like statecraft than they seem personal. I'm not necessarily berating her, because they might be statecraft. She might not have known her brother all that well. But with the reactions to her mother's death, that's different. That feels real. And those are she ascends to the throne. In this chapter, she loses She has a daughter, she has a son, she loses a father-in-law, she loses her mother, and she gains a throne. That's where these chapters end this time around. I trust that those of you who enjoyed the first 100 pages are only even more enjoying the second 100 pages. And about those 100 pages, I want to point out that I want to make that point again, that for good or ill, when you're reading a biography, especially by an experienced biographer, you are dealing with their assemblage of the facts. I'm hoping that it was pretty obvious to you, especially in these 100 pages, that these 100 pages worth of story could have been written in a very different way. We need not have seen the sides of Marie Antoinette that we see in these pages. We certainly need not have had them be so prominent. The Marie Antoinette in these pages, in fact, in this biography so far, is a genuinely winning person. She seems self-aware in the way that, again, royalty often does not. She seems earnestly good-natured and a hard worker. In other words, again, totally at odds with the knee-jerk thumbnail description of this character. That's my impression. Rereading these pages made it even stronger, but also reinforced in my mind that Antonia Fraser is really good at this. She's really good at not only storytelling. Oh my God, I've heard from so many of you about the first 100 pages that was one of the first things you noticed was the storytelling and how good it is. Not storytelling in the pejorative sense of making things up, but storytelling in the sense of I've got a huge subject to deal with. I know that a lot of you aren't convinced that biography can be interesting. I intend to convince you. I've had so many emails from people who said, I love your channel, which of course I don't mean to blow that off. That means a lot to me. But I've had so many people say, I love your channel, and I've gotten a lot of good book recommendations from you. I would never have read this book on my own, but if it's going to be your book club, I will try it. And every one of those people that has emailed me has said, I'm really, really glad that I did. This is wonderful. And not like anything else I've ever read, not like the fiction that I read. Okay, well, I am hoping if a lot of you are in that boat, I'm hoping that this book is your doorway to reading biographies, because a lot of them are really good. You need recommendations, you just let me know. But that's where we're going to wrap things up for now with these second 100 pages, which have two main effects. One is that they subtly, gently, but firmly revamp our knee-jerk reaction to who Marie Antoinette was. The normal thumbnail of her as being a ineffectual, condescending, aristocratic airhead, and the subtle characterization of her as being someone who more or less deserved her execution are out the window in these pages. This is a completely different character and totally grounded in fact. So it might not be the quote-unquote real Marie Antoinette. We don't know who that was. We can't know who that was, but it's mighty convincing. That's one thing. And the other thing that these chapters do by doing that first thing is to increase a background tension when we're reading these chapters, for the very reason that I started with. Because we know how this ends. We know how this story ends. And it's not, by the time you get to the end of these 100 pages, you will be saying, without any irony, and also without necessarily any royalist sympathies, you'll be saying, I know how this story ends, and it shouldn't have ended that way. Which is no small thing. You will be, by the time you get to the end of this week's chapters, you will be wishing for Marie the same end that came to her mother. A long, fulfilled life, relatively happy, in bed, surrounded by people. You won't wish on her the ending that came to her father-in-law, King Louis XV, where, as we're told in the chapters about his death, the minute he stopped breathing, Marie and all of her attendants and her husband thought they heard the sound of thunder. But it wasn't thunder. It wasn't the heavens rebelling at the death of a king. It was the sound of all the footprints of the courtiers, who immediately ran away from King Louis's bedside to rush towards the new monarch. He's left alone with one bedchamber nurse, and that's it. We don't want that end for her, but we do want something like her mother's end for her, and we know that's not going to happen. But we have a ways to go. First, we have another 100. We're going to read another 100 pages for next time. So that is going to be we are going to read to around page 300 for the next installment of the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club. And although we're starting off with those 100 pages with Marie as the new queen and as a mother to children and also the heir, as beloved by her people, crowed and cheered in the streets, the end of those 100 pages of reading next time, they get us up to 1789, which was not a good year for Marie Antoinette. So we'll be reading those 100 pages next time. But I also wanted to wrap up this segment. I'll try to remember to put this in the video description. I will also want to give you a head up, since we're about a third of the way, going on halfway through the month. I want to give you a heads up as to what the next Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club pick will be, so that you can get it from the library, find it in a used bookstore. Of course, if you need help from me, you have plenty of time to let me know. And we're going to coincide this with another BookTube event. March of the Mammoths is back on BookTube for the month of March. March of the Mammoths is a celebration of books that are 800 pages long or more. Take them down off your shelf, give them a try, borrow them from the library, buy them from the used bookstore, and give something that long a try. And in March, we're going to do that, and we're also going to finish up some unfinished business from the Steve Tiberius Donoghue Book Club, because we will be reading the third and final volume in Hilary Mantel's Thomas Cromwell books, The Mirror and the Light. In my UK trade paperback here, it is almost 900 pages long, so over 800 pages. A long book, a long historical novel, but you have time now. If you're in the midst of reading the second book in the series, Bring Up the Bodies, you'll have time to finish that. I'm going to say that if I give you a little bit of prep work ahead of time, maybe a video or maybe two, I'm not sure that you'll need that. I will do my best. I'm going to be gladly going over this in order to proctor a book club about it. And I think I can work up a fairly detailed, quick, good checklist so that you don't need to read either Wolf Hall or Bring Up the Bodies to read this thing and like it. I'm pretty sure I can do that. That's going to be our next one. That's going to be March. And I'll make a separate announcement video for this in a week or two, just in case the people who aren't interested in Marie Antoinette are not watching this video. But I want to give those of you who are dedicated not so much to Marie Antoinette, but to the book club, advance warning to know what's coming. And feel free, again, to let me know, especially if you want an ebook, but also if you want me to find you a physical copy. I doubt I can find you a physical copy like this, because I treasure it. I've never seen it. I've seen it but once here in the U.S. But anyway, that is where we stop for now. We are stopping with now Queen Marie Antoinette. She is Queen Consort. She is the king's wife. And we are almost at the pinnacle of the summary glory of her life. She's had tragedies in these chapters that we read today, but she is coming into her own. So that's going to be a little bittersweet to read next time. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.